Why do you have such long thumbs?
I don't know. They're so long.
So, hi, Alexis.
Hi, Erica.
Who are you?
I am an art consultant, project manager, art curator in Los Angeles, California. But yeah, primarily now I help collectors find art and work on their own creative projects, which entails sourcing the art, framing art, shipping art, hanging art, installing. And source of income is probably the best way to say it. I do curation with a curatorial partner here in Los Angeles for an outfit we call Softcore LA, and I also do some independent curating on the side, and that's for the love of the game.
That's perfect because we're going to talk about what you think and what you know about the art industry.
Fantastic. Quiz me. I love tests.
I will try. I'm going to give you 3 questions.
Okay.
And then afterwards, we are going to touch upon some money related questions. What is a practice?
For me personally, my practice is very education based, very research based. I am always, and I have always been very ravenous in the terms of learning about what's going on, where it's happening, who's doing it, and why. Because as I'm not an artist myself, but I think the French define like curator as like an art of of other people's art. So it's really important for me as a dealer and as a curator to know what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot. And I mean, it's never ending. I'm learning new things all the time, every day, of new artists, new galleries, new spaces, new residencies, new practice, new institutions. There's just a lot. And as we become an increasingly international art world, with like the connections of now digital viewing rooms and art fairs and all of that, it's really important to educate myself, so I can be informed as a curator when I'm choosing my shows, choosing my artists, choosing my themes that I'm interested in exploring and communicating through the arts. And then also same thing when I'm building a collector's collection of art. What are they interested in and why? And then finding the best pieces that go along with it, because it's most of my collectors, I'm very fortunate in that they're very interested in what they're interested in as collectors, not what's necessarily the hottest trend in the art world. Although that's also important to know, because sometimes that overlaps and you want to know why you can't get access to a piece. It's because they're very hot right now. So it's good to follow the trends and what informs them and what informs the practices of the people that I'm interested in. And that involves a lot of reading. It involves studio visits, it involves conversations with other gallerists. It involves social media. It involves the news, and it involves some just good old book reading, which is great.
Okay, cool. So that's your practice.
That's my
and then
practice.
As a curator, as a dealer, what are you looking for in terms of an artist's practice? How would you define what an artist's practice would be?
For me, an artist's practice, the ones I'm attracted to the most are the people who are also as curious as I am. I find that the artists that have something to say and are trying to say it in the best way possible, and that's a lifelong mission, really. It's is it photography, or is it installation, or is it painting, or is it multimedia? There are things that they're trying to say and communicate to the audiences, and it's that journey, it's that striving to build and communicate those things that they're trying to say. And that's kind of what I look for in an artist's practice. And I can see it. I'm always reticent to use the word, but haven't found a better one. It's almost compulsive. And it is, for artists, it is, to keep pushing.
Yeah.
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 It is. You got to,
The
it's,
curiosity, I definitely, or curiosity slash open-mindedness has to be almost, yeah, I would say like compulsive, basically, because you have to find the sources of like what you were saying before. Basically, it's like you need to go read and you need to go look at stuff, and there's a lot. And I think for me, I would definitely also define my practice as something very similar. It's a lot of research, it's a
mhm,
lot of looking at things and being informed in
mhm,
order for you to be able to make something, or for you to know what you want to be making. Is asking a lot of questions and not necessarily always having the answer, but the practice itself is to go and like search for things.
right. And it's that, and that's a process. And it's, and I think that, and it's also, because it can be outside or it can be inside. It can be inside work that you're asking the questions for. It can be outside work of who you're asking the questions of or what you're asking the questions of. Um, and, but it is like a continual investigation. Think of it like a practice like Oliver Eliason, I mean, like he's literally dealing with like light reflection and refraction. So it isn't wild to think that he took a walk one day and saw some light off of, through some rain or off of like some snowbank, and then he has an entirely new series.
For sure.
And like what that means. And that's research, especially my curatorial practice. Like the thing about, I think, that is so attractive to me about the Great British Baking Show is how kind they are to each other, and how encouraging they are of each other, and how wonderful it is when they're all kind of working together, even though they're doing their separate things and they are in competition with each other. It doesn't mean that they can't be nice. It doesn't mean that they can't share some sugar. It doesn't mean that they can't be sad because that person's cake fell, or that someone's not going to have actual genuine sympathy for the person who wasn't able to achieve it, because they know that one day they might not be able to achieve that thing. And that kind of little tiny, it's kind of aspirational in terms of like the art world I would like to exist in, and the one that I like to think that I'm
We
building,
made
where we
one.
made one, right? Where it's like we can be kind and encouraging to each other,
Mhm.
while kind of, for lack of a better word, being in competition, because there's only so many spots, but also at the same time, like everyone's happy to be there. And it does make, it also is like people learning more because of it, because they're against somebody else and they're pushing each other in really positive ways. And, finding things like that, that's like a really exciting model of like working together.
So, do
Um,
you think that there's a market for that? Which is my second question for you. So, we've talked about what a practice is in terms of you as a dealer, what your practice is, and then also what you're looking for in terms of for an artist and their practice. So, if you're talking about like the sense of the research and encouragement and like having things that inspire you, what's the market? Is there a market for something like this?
I mean, I think it's again like how there's 1,000 different practices. I think there's 1,000 different markets, and I think that everyone does it themselves a disservice is saying that there's not, or that there's only one, because there's a market for people who have a low budget of, purchases, but love art, and will do what they can to get something that's $100 on their wall because it brings them true joy. Just the same way that there's a market for people who have $1 million because that piece was on the cover of Art Forum last year and it's, a trendy piece. um, and one doesn't negate the other. And I'm not even saying one's better than the other.
No, but
Obviously
there are
one's
definitely
more,
different people,
but they're
though.
different people,
Yeah.
and one's more lucrative than the other, but that doesn't make it better.
Mhm.
And it just means that it's a different market. And I think the fact that like there's there's the $100 and there's the $1 million and there's $100 million, that means that there's 100 million markets in between, just from a financial point of view. But the same way of having the different artists who are engaging with their conversations that they're having in their own practices, there's different markets for that as well, because there is a market for people who, someone who wants to spend a week on a 2 inch by 2 inch canvas of, a tiny little painting.
the same way that there's a market for somebody who wants to, do a space installation that takes up, a
Sure.
700 square foot, gallery completely. And I think finding out what your market is, I mean, I guess I'm talking about like practice and market kind of conflating, but I think that it's not as different as we think.
No, and I think that is really important as like really laying your foundation, which is why these workshops now exist, is because it's really sort of laying the foundation to explore the ideas of like what does it mean to go and build on the fundamentals? What are the fundamentals? And I would say that the first thing is to really know like what is your practice, and the second knowing like second to that is what is your market,
right?
Because I'm not saying that, just like you, it's not like it's better to go and make work aimed at like the cover for art forum or whatever, but you hope that you can find somebody who understands what you're making. If not even for you to sell, but for you to know that you have an audience that you can grow with. And that can be down, and I would like bridge that into two large groupings. So it would be the academic route, which is a bit more, say, you're looking for grants, you're looking for residencies. So you're getting paid, you have patrons coming in, paying you to go and make the work, rather than you actively looking for customers to go and sell to. And different types of work fits into different types of markets. And I'm not saying that your practice can't do both things. It's just that at the very beginning, it's a lot easier when you're able to go and be like, oh, okay, this is what I do. This is what I'm trying to go and look for. And then go down that path before you sort of have like both feet into different paths.
It's important to have these conversations early, because it's also, if there is going to be a chance for both or one or the other, it's good to know what you're building, how to focus, and be able to make those priorities of, okay, like I need to be actively researching grants. I need to actively be researching galleries. I need to depending on which one. And then also, if there is, if you decide to do the grant way, amazing. And then you can really you can focus your energies in the way that you need to be focusing, and you don't have to waste your time and your energy and your money, because time is money, and like your resources are money, and your materials are money, and that's really important to kind of get those things done. And then also for because these conversations have to be ongoing continually. It's like but it's really good to start them now. And a lot of artists do practice like that, like they have their kind of bread and butter, where this is like a safe place aesthetically for collectors, for museums, for whatever the finances are coming from, for grants, for shows, for installations. And then they can use that money to fund the passion projects
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that can eventually lead to more an entirely new bread and butter area of a thing. But there is a conscious effort of like, I'm doing these kinds of paintings or this kind of photography, or I'm taking these commercial gigs or music video gigs or graphic design gigs to get the money to work on this film, this installation, this sculpture, this art. And that's like a super viable way to work.
I think that's really important to understand. Like, you have a goal, you want to be in this market, and that like being able to go and define that is really useful. You're consistently like reflecting on what you're doing in your practice in order for you to move forward. It's like, do I still want to do this? Like, am I changing this? Am I just changing the medium, but I'm not changing my practice? Like those kind of standard questions. So then I'm going to ask you my third question, which is about positions. So now that we've talked about like what a practice is, what is a market, what is your market, so who are you going to go and talk to? What is the difference between like a director versus a curator versus a dealer?
You want to know about art dealers. These are people who have direct contact with collectors. And they are also, and they're also looking for, new and exciting stuff for their collectors all the time.
Dealer is somebody who could potentially represent you And it's a middle person that
An art dealer is an art dealer or art consultant. It's kind of an amorphous thing. They don't necessarily represent artists.
okay.
They represent clients and collectors,
Okay.
who are, and they're the people who are in charge of those collections, or, you know, help them find artists.
So you're a middle person, basically.
I'm a middle person.
So
basically.
you get to know artists,
Mhm.
and then you also know collectors.
Yes.
But
And I
you
also know galleries.
but you don't necessarily represent the artist to go and sell their work to a collector.
Right.
Okay.
I'd be able to sell that. I'd be able to broker the deal, but I wouldn't be exclusive. A gallery that represents artists, usually galleries represent artists and artist estates, and they are active. There's a deal in place where you work with them, and they have a vested interest in your career. So they are promoting you, they're advertising you, they're working on your marketing, they're putting on shows for you, and they have a sales department, depending on how large it is. It could be just the director and like an assistant, and they're working on sales for you, and people come to them and they reach out to people for your works. Or there's like a devoted salesperson. If you were represented by a dealer and someone contacted you, you would direct them to the dealer. But if you are not represented yet and someone contacted you for a piece, you could just deal with it directly.
But that's also not a curator. So even in a
Also not a curator. So there's not even
no. Okay.
So a curator is someone who's putting on the shows. True sense of the word, academically, institutionally, it is someone at a museum who is doing, you know, research exhibitions.
So they weave the story together of like whatever
Exactly.
theme that is going to be the exhibition.
So their point of their communication is the message they're trying to tell is through the artists and artworks that they choose for the viewer to come into. That can be, and that can also translate to something as simple as like a retrospective, or like a more like a, you know, the last couple of years of your work. They would come into your gallery or your studio, and they would pick out the pieces that they think best represent what you're trying to communicate as an artist. Because you guys have had a lot of conversations about like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? And then I would come in, this is my curator hat on. I would come in and I'd see, and we'd go through your works, and we would see what you've been working on, what you are working on, and what it is that you're trying to communicate. And then I would pick out what I think is best that highlights these priorities for you, and what kind of themes and ideas that are important for that show, and what make those messages as clear as possible and as concise as possible for the people to come through and see, this is who Erica Wong is as an artist. So that is what a curator does.
A curator is somebody who weaves that story together, and they look for them in different places to really make that story come to life. So who's a director then?
So the director of a gallery is the person who's running the space administratively. They're probably making the decisions on which artists are there, that help, you know, support other artists, that are complementing each other, because they're kind of, for lack of a better word, they're kind of curating their program of artists.
So would you say that it's something sort of like a curator is here, the person who groups the story together, and then you sort of have like this, the director who comes and tells you what they wanted the story to be like in the first place. And then like curator here is like, oh, okay, I understand. I'm going to go to do the research. I'm going to go and pull the pieces wherever that like will make the story come to life.
Mm-hmm.
And then next to that is that you have a dealer who may or may not be able to like maybe working with the curator, but definitely working with the dealer, because then they can go, working with the director, because there's a lot more finances that come into play, whereas for a curator there's definitely less money happening. But the director here and the dealer here are really much more looking towards at the finances of how to fund the exhibition, or fund or like get the artist paid or whatever it is. Would you say that that's probably a way of like looking at the relationship between curator, dealer, and then you have a director?
Yes. Because you definitely want to have like the director themselves, they're like looking at the whole novel or the whole series of novels, really. The curators are coming in and doing a chapter. You know, they're doing like, this is like one story in the overarching needs of this museum. This is one story in the overarching needs of this gallery. The director is looking at,
hence why there could be lots of different curators.
Exactly. So there could be, because there's so many different chapters for so many,
Exactly.
depending on which institution we're talking about, and so many different specialties, because again, like I've said before, and I'll say every day for the rest of my life, there's so much, and you can't be an expert in everything.
Which is like a good thing.
Which is a good thing. So that's why you'll see so many different departments at museums, or even in a smaller museum, you'll see quite a few, because there are going to be specialties. And they'll have people who have different focuses, because it does require the time and the energy to gain that kind of knowledge. So the director's really looking at all of it. So if you're approaching a director about your practice, they're thinking about, where does it fit in curatorially? Where does it fit in with my other stable of artists? How do you fit in with my collectors and like what I can sell them? Because again, capitalism, this is how we're funding things. Or, how can I fit this in with like curators that I know at museums who I know that they like to, do things of this theme. This could be a good fit for that, and that's how they can kind of play their chess pieces. So they're really looking at all of it. The dealer is much more focused on their personal collectors, their clients. And if they're representing an artist, getting that artist in front of dealers that are in front of directors that are important, in front of curators that are important, in front of other salespeople at galleries that are important, and even potentially again, and then the gallery directors are also looking, and museum directors are handling like the marketing of their museum, their gallery, their artist. They're really looking at the bigger picture administratively and financially. Curators are much more for, the romance of it and the academia of it and the storytelling of it. And it's a very, in its purest form, it's a very pure, beautiful, wonderful place of like connection between, getting the artist's voice out. And then the necessary evils are the rest of us.
This is a good place to go and be like, let's talk about the money side of things a little bit. I think one of the biggest things that I had a really hard time answering, and probably still answering now, is what is your time worth?
Hi, my name is Megan O'Neill, and I work in artist management and curation. My background is actually in fine arts, so I got my master's at Claremont Graduate School in drawing and painting. When I was in grad school about 4 years ago, typically painters would charge the most for their works. Unfortunately, drawings are typically less expensive, and then sculpture usually would fall somewhere in between. And we would talk with each other tentatively to sort of get a gauge on how much everyone else was charging to try to be around the same ballpark area. But typically when we were in grad school and we would do open studios, I would say standard paintings around like 24 by 36 would range between $900 and $1,500. I think some students would value their works higher, maybe $2,000, $2,500.
How much money did you spend on your materials for this piece? And how much time did you spend on it? And again, like the very easy formula of how much, you should charge for your time is, what do you think you should be making in a year? And then dividing that up by the weeks, and then 40 hours a week, boom, that's how much you think that you should be making an hour. So again, if you are going to be doing a gallery, then you might you might need to bump that up because some of that's getting taken out. Or if you have a dealer that's taking 15% or 30%, bump up that 30% because what the money is going to be coming to you. And so it's like you spent 20 hours on that piece. Great. So it's that 20 hours plus your materials plus the 15%.
Don't forget that. Do not forget
the
that.
materials. It's not just your time. It's also the
It's
materials.
not. Correct.
And that includes too, like, did you have to rent a truck? Are you doing
Yes.
install? Or like, if you're not, then don't worry about that. But if these are things that you need to add in, did you have somebody come in and help you and you have to pay them? Add that in plus the 15%.
Do you pay for a rental for your studio? Go and put that in there. Like
Put that in
all
there
of
because
these have to be part of your time worth.
Exactly. So if you have your studio too, it's like, this is, all right, it took me 2 weeks to make this. What's your rent for a month? Boom, divided by 2, add that on because that was, plus the 15% or the 50%, whatever it is. Like, because you need to consider these costs. And, with a little bit of math, you can figure out what it is and you can add that into like your hourly situation.
As long as you're not losing money on your materials, I think that it's just a personal choice and how comfortable you feel with your work being out there, without being too lofty and thinking that it's worth much, much more without a proven sales history. Next question.
If you are working with a gallery and you're making a piece, do they pay you up front and then you go
Depends.
make it?
Each one, everyone's different. So there's just a couple examples of how it can go is, say, the easiest one is 50-50 split on a piece. And they don't cover anything. So that's when you're adding in your costs for when you're pricing this piece. Also, it's nice to have a dealer in a gallery because they will help you price things to make sure that they're right. And they'll ask you the right questions and they'll help you like work it out. And, but hopefully you trust them very much and they'll do it properly. So that's an easy one. Sometimes it's 50-50 and they cover your costs of your materials. And that's really nice. And then you have to, again, have your receipts so you can show them this is exactly what went into this. Sometimes it's a little bit less. Sometimes you don't get 50% in the beginning. Sometimes they take a little bit more. And sometimes as you grow, they might take a little less than 50%. So that is always different. It also depends, is it a commission? Some galleries and artists like to take a deposit. That's super fair to ask for. You're asking for a piece. I need 20% deposit because you've got to buy your materials.
The typical standard is 20% added on for commissioned artworks. So if that works for you, then that's great. I think that it's also one of those personal decisions. If you feel like it's not worth your time and you don't want to do commissions, don't do them. If it's worth it for you and you want to add 10%, do that.
And you need to feed yourself.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important to go and differentiate the two as well. Exactly. It's like somebody coming in with a commission is very different than, say, you're represented by a gallery and that they will give you because like how you're going to be able to go and price things are going to be different. They're not
exactly,
even though like it sounds like it's the same thing, it's not the same thing. And these like money side of things is very important for you to be able to understand that a commission, you might be actually charging a different price because there are less costs because you're not necessarily paying for your gallery to go and do X for you. Whereas if you are represented by a gallery, there will be a very large, like 50% of it that will be taken up to go and pay the gallery for their services, right? Like, because you are funding for their service, for you to exist, for you to sell.
And this is also important when you're getting into these deals with art dealers and with galleries, is to know what the exclusivity is, because sometimes you can be represented by an art dealer exclusively or not, or a gallery exclusively or not. And if you are represented by a gallery or dealer exclusively and you take that commission outside of that, that's a risk of a burned bridge because you've broken a contract. So, these are things that you have to consider when someone's like, I want to be exclusive with you. And then you have to be like, okay, that's great. And that's amazing. Because then you get the support of that dealer in that gallery, but that means that nothing else can come in on the side. because these are the people who are representing you and they're putting in the work. And there's a very good chance that the reason that someone's coming to you from the side is because of the work that was put into your career by that dealer or that gallery, because of the article they got or the post that they did or the show that they did. What are the terms? Are they taking 15%? Are they taking 50? Are they covering costs? How are they advertising, the shows? These are things to talk about.
Within like the conversation of talking about finances and talking about money is have a formula, which Alexa's very kind to provide, one of how do you actually price your time? How much you charge is different. What can you charge for when you are represented by a gallery versus by when you're doing something that is a commission? Those are two separate thoughts, and those are different types of monies that you also have to understand that it might be a different equation, but having the equation nonetheless in the very beginning is super useful.
Exactly. Don't be too cheap. Don't undersell yourself, because people will either take advantage or think that you must not be worth it. People know things cost money. What is your practice and why? Because you will be asked to defend it.
And also, who's your market, right? Like you need to know what your practice is, and you need to know who is in that market that you are going to potentially be working with, and then understanding like the positions, like, are you working with a dealer? Are you working with a curator? Are you working with the director? And then having that formula of knowing like what your time is worth. And I think also factoring in like what you're saying, that like people will ask for a standard discount.
Oh, absolutely.
The standard discount, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is like 5 to 10%.
10%.
So also factor that in, because that's really important. So
exactly. And if you're working with a gallery or a dealer, they should be helping you with that too, because there is a chance, for instance, when I'm working with a gallery, I'll ask for a discount, because a way that a dealer gets paid for is usually a percentage of the piece. There's a couple different ways. Curators are usually on salary, unless they're doing something for a gallery, then they probably will get a percentage of the sale, and that'll be like there, or they could get a flat fee. Directors are usually on salary, and it depending on the institution or gallery, bonuses and sales commissions. Dealers are on commission. So if I'm selling and it's usually a pretty standard 10%, that usually 10 to 15% goes down if the prices go up. So that's something, for instance, when I'm working with the gallery, I'll ask for a discount, because I also know that my client is going to have to be paying me the 10%. So that's usually why a 10% discount is pretty standard, because they're going to
it's factored in.
It's factored
absolutely.
in. So like the piece is $10,000, they'll give it to me for $9,000. I'll charge him $900, and he gets it for $100 off. Now, it's not the craziest discount in the world, but he also means he just got all of my effort and work that went into buying that piece and finding that piece for him. And that's not bad. So that's another reason that why, if you're ever wondering, but it's not just because people are cheap. There is a reason that people do ask for discounts, because if you are getting a piece for $10,000 and then I charge them another 10% on top of that, then the piece is $11,000. And then it's like, oh, well, I liked it for $10,000, but do I like it for $11,000? That's a lot. That's a lot of the reason why the discounts happen. And also same thing if, discounts happen because a piece is going from LA to Brussels. Someone has to pay for insurance and shipping. The piece is really, really large. You're going to have to pay for hanging it. So these things do add up on the buyer's end. And that's another reason for negotiation. So if a gallery contacts you and be like, hey, they're asking for 20% off, it's not necessarily because the person's just cheap. It's just because they might be in Paris and it might be a 7-flight walk up where, with a 6x6 canvas that needs to be installed above a thing. And, all of these things add up. And it's, there's very, very rarely are there not reasons. So it's just good to be aware that all of those things do play a part in terms of, whoever's purchasing it.
Thanks. So that's it. Thanks for watching and listening.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.